despite my name is very ornithological, because Uriol stands for the Catalan word for the bird golden oriole. I'm working, as Carlos said, for the Catalan Ornithological Society. So I am in charge of conservation and study of amphibians and reptiles. And we have organized this panel discussion on biodiversity and biodiversity data on private owned land. And we have 4 people that is going to be with me. They're going to be the stars of the session, not me. So I'll ask one by one to give a short introduction of themselves. Starting, for example, I'll keep the floor in Catalonia with Laura Force. It's from the Center of Research in Terrestrial Ecology, CREAF, very close actually where I'm right now. So Laura, if you can give a short introduction about yourself, your background, and also where you work on, it would be amazing.
Okay, perfect, Uriol. So thank you all for letting me be here with you, all of you. And as Uriol said, I'm Laura Force. I'm working, well, I'm a biologist, but I also have a degree in philosophy. So excuse me if I say something strange. Don't let it count. And I have a master's degree in terrestrial ecology. So at the present moment, I'm working at CREAF, which is a public research center on ecology and forestry applications. And my tasks are directly related with citizen science done in the center. I give a transversal support to all of our citizen science projects. So I'm here on behalf of all of them. So citizen science, it's a transversal research line on OA in CREAF. It's a research way centered on climate change, on biodiversity consideration, and both of these ways are interconnected. And we are incorporating a new point of view to reduce the break or the lag between citizens and researchers, which is considering a citizen science project team as a team formed by researchers and citizens, not with a difference between them. So citizens are part of the team, not an accessory or not something complementary. They are a main piece of the team. So maybe to simplify an important project or both a pair of important projects, I would like to, well, we have 5 or 6 projects in CREAF on citizen science, but I will talk a little bit about Alerta Forestal, which is like tries to keep an eye on forest health with citizens health, and its final objective is to take care of forests, but it is useful to or for management, those private and public ones. On the other hand, more directly connected as with biodiversity, as Matthias said before, in CREAF we have the Catalan connection with iNaturalist Spain, with Javiz Spain, and iNaturalist is a citizen science tool. It is a citizen science platform to register and monitor biodiversity. And I think after this little presentation, we can talk about it. And we telling all of this, I pretend to express the potential of citizen science in order to promote awareness and influence on management, including every human lover of nature and transforming those who are not into it. So for me. If you have some question or specific, I can answer it.
Lovely. So I think we can move to Carlos Sanchez himself from Fundación Artemisa. But maybe, Carlos, I'm not sure you can give a very, very brief description, because you gave some inputs already on what you're doing. What do you think?
So you mean about myself?
Yes, but
yeah.
So you can, well.
Yeah. I'm director of research of Fundación Artemisa. I'm a vet, although I have been working in things more related to biology and ecology. Within our organization, we cover a wide range of topics. We have projects related to game bird conservation, mammals, to the importance of economy generated by hunting. Now we're finishing one about the role of women in hunting, for example. So it's quite a wide range of topics. I have already in my talk speak about some things. Now I need to put myself more from the private landowner point of view, okay? Because the focus of this discussion and the webinar is about private landowners, and we understand that the data they are collecting now, private land specifically, but overall it's crucial if we want to conserve biodiversity, not only game species but also others. This is a turning point, and people are embracing this idea through the Observatorio Cinegético, the Hunters Watch. The data belongs to them because they gather, but they also give us the data for conducting analysis. It's very important that they understand that, as I said before, nobody's going to see their data, the specific data, but they are happy if we aggregate and we give data about at a county scale, provincial scale, regional scale, and national scale. But this is complex, and we try to make them part of the whole system. So I said before, if they are not happy with something or they want to suggest, we want them to be involved. So it's not only us saying, oh, you need to go this time of the year. Of course, it has to be systematic because we are scientists, but we want them to participate. And we have already discussed. It's very important the feedback. We try to make it as simple as possible, as we were discussing before with Nora. And we want them to feel they are part of the project, they belong to the project. And sometimes they have had bad experiences in the past. Especially in protected areas, they had bad experiences. So it's a classic. For example, Iberian lynxes coming back to many parts of Spain and Portugal, or big raptors that in the past, decades ago, they were heavily prosecuted. Now the people, have changed completely, although there are some terrorists sometimes. But in these recent decades, when they got, for example, an Iberian lynx in their hunting ground, sometimes some regional administrations and policymakers were a bit invasive, and there are problems. Sometimes there are damages, and other example, there's a raptor nesting somewhere, and in a perimeter of 1 kilometer, you can't do any management on your land. So those are things that we have to work very carefully, because of course we need to take care of nature, of wildlife, but we need to take care of those that have conserved that piece of land. And that's why, for example, many of them, they oppose to restrictions or the banning of hunting or other activities in places. And it's a paradox, but the vast majority of the national parks in Spain and other parts of the world, they were in the origin hunting reserves. So they have kept that wildlife because there was a restriction. They were kept by gamekeepers, by wildlife wardens. So, we need to understand the point of view of private landowners, who actually are very happy to be part in this in this project. And I think, and I finish, again, the key of citizen science for many of them, now I'm speaking on their behalf and not on behalf of my organization, the key is that these citizen science projects can help them to improve their management, to amend something if there is a problem, if something is wrong. But of course, they don't want these projects to happen if at the end they are going to be unfairly badly affected. Okay, so it's a very difficult balance, but I'm sure, and they are very happy collaborating with us, for example, I'm sure it can be done. That's my my thoughts and my reflection. Thank you, Leo.
Yeah, it's true that when it comes to limitations and restrictions, things get very difficult. It's very good point indeed. So I would give the floor to Beth Thomas from Yorkshire Wildlife Trust to present herself a little bit for 2 or 3 minutes. Beth?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. So I work for the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, which is a conservation charity in the north of England, and I work on our Yorkshire peat programme. So I'm an ecologist, I've trained as an ecologist, and I'm currently manager of the data and evidence team at the Yorkshire Peat Partnership. So we have large amounts of data from our surveys and our monitoring of the land that we're restoring and working on across the north of England. And we have a team that manages and develops our remote sensing and other methods of monitoring these landscapes. But more recently, my roles also included setting up and engaging volunteers and land management in our new citizen science project. So the Yorkshire Peat Partnership is a peatland restoration programme. So we restore peatlands, mostly blanket bogs upon the hills of the north of England. We're a partnership organisation of various NGOs, the national parks, the water companies, and some government organisations. So they all have a say in how we are run and what we do, which results in a lot of different directions that we need to go in, a lot of different views on how the work should be done. But the bulk of our work, the bulk of the partnership work, is doing the restoration. And for the last 12 years, that's been very much the focus, getting out onto land and restoring damaged peatlands that have been mostly damaged by drainage for making the land better for grazing, but also from the climate change and from pollution and things like that. So we've worked on over 46,000 hectares over the last 12 years, and all of the land we have worked on is privately owned by private landowners or other NGOs. So we don't own any of the sites that we've worked on. So more recently, we were looking at ways that we could engage people in this landscape. So the uplands of northern England are a very remote location to take people out to. They're quite inhospitable. The weather's often exceedingly wet and rainy. And it's very difficult to show people how important these bogs are and how important they are for conservation in terms of the animals that they can support, but also, for climate change, the carbon they can store, the ability they have to clean the water and slow the flow in these environments. So we were looking for ways to engage people in what it is we're doing. And so we looked at a programme called Eyes on the Bog, which was a citizen science monitoring programme designed by the UK IUCN peatland programme. So they designed what they would like people to roll out across the UK, a very simple monitoring system of looking at the peat depth, looking at how the water table changes, looking at the vegetation, taking lots of fixed point photography. And we very much wanted to roll this out, but even a cheap monitoring program still requires a cost of staff time, buying the kit for the volunteers to have. So we spent several years putting it into funding bids, struggling very much so, because funders like funding the diggers on the ground, but they're not really that interested in funding people going out and doing the monitoring on those sites. So it took several years of putting it into pretty much every funding bid that we were going for before we finally got some funding, for about 10 months of staff time and lots of money for the kit. So over the last year, we've been putting out the kit with volunteers. because we've been working with landowners for so long in this landscape, we knew many of our landowners very well. And so we went to the ones that we knew would be positive about the monitoring, and asked them if they'd like to get involved. And so far they've been very positive, but we have only been working with the ones we knew would be positive. And we've been getting volunteer organisations involved, so the volunteers of some of the other NGOs we work with, who are all extremely enthusiastic about being out in these environments. And then we've gone out and we've put plots on lots of different sites. We've taken volunteers out and trained them in how we want them to do the data collection. So showing them how to set up the plots, how to collect the data. And then we've also been working with an organisation at Leeds University who have set up a peat data hub, so an online resource where the volunteers can then input their data into that. And the idea being that all the data is free to access, so they can look at other people's data, but also anyone else can go onto that, download the data off that website, and hopefully use it in some of the science and research that people would like to do on these landscapes. So that's what we've managed to do so far. We've put out around 50 or 60 plots across the north of England. We've worked with over 40 different volunteers over the last year, but we've still got lots more to do. There's lots more volunteers that are keen to put out sites. We've got more engagement with landowners to find the sites for them to put things out on. And then we're also looking forward to how we might engage those volunteers going forward, so showing them how their data is contributing to a wider data set, how it helps us at the partnership inform the monitoring that we're doing, but also inform the restoration work that we're doing going forward. So it's about quite a new project, but yeah, very exciting for us. Yeah.
I think we're going to talk about some of the things and items you mentioned later. And now I give the floor to the last panelist of today's debate. He's coming from Hoka Wildlife Management. Goedemorgen, Job Groosmans. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for introducing. I might be a bit strange to all of you. For one, I don't have a background in biology or ecology. I have a professional background in healthcare projects, healthcare research, and healthcare education. But for all the time I'm not in the office, I tend to be in the woods from a very young age, as well for forest or land maintenance activities, observation of animals, but as well as a hunter or as an amateur of outdoor sports. And throughout my both worlds, I got more and more confronted with the fact that in nature, there's a lot of emotion and a lot of convincement that one's on a good path. While in healthcare, I found out, or just like many of my colleagues, we found that communication, certainly on cultural differences, is very important. And then we don't need to talk about languages or countries or ethics or whatever. We could easily say that nature management as well is a combination of many different cultures who are not contributing and cooperating. Another thing in healthcare is if things are easy, a doctor can handle, but when things get complex, you need a multidisciplinary team. So at a certain point in time, I tried to convert this knowledge into what eventually came up as a small business. So today I own a small company in wildlife management that does both government assignments as well as private projects. We do inventory activities, sometimes on our own, but also for which we use volunteers a lot of times. We do coaching projects, process support and facilitation between different parties involved in a same problem or a same project. But we're also actively involved in management and maintainment of, for instance, wild boar, geese, and invasive non-European species. So that's a bit what we're doing.
It's also very interesting indeed.
Yes, well, but I might be a little strange within this group of people. But so I joined late because of other duties. The speeches I saw were mainly from people from NGOs. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm somewhere in between of government, NGOs, and private landowners. And so my most important part of work is bringing these people together. And that means that, for instance, I've seen the presentation of Hannes, who says we have a very large platform, which is actually working very good. I tend to use it regularly, by the way. But it also means that what's on that platform needs to be translated again to a very small piece of land. Yeah. And the one occupying or owning that land needs to see the use he can make from it. And there's a lot of communication to be done there before goals can be reached. So yeah, that's my business.
Luckily enough, we have a philosophist in the
yeah. Thank you, Laura.
So we can manage that. So we have around 30 minutes to discuss some of the questions we have prepared. And I would like you to answer these questions, but maybe in a more fluid way. So we try to complement each other's answers, so it gets more, liquid. Let's call it like that. So the first one has to do with the fact that how can data related to biodiversity in our land can help us to improve its management. And I'm very curious, I will add more specificity to this question about communication, because you've mentioned that you directly use data uploaded in other platforms, and maybe you get in contact with owners. And I'm very curious also about, for example, Alerta Forestal project from Laura. How can you communicate, or if you communicate information to owners? Because I think most of the time we are lucky enough if there's an administration or an NGO that sees some of the problems or opportunities in these platforms that are usually websites, and then gets in contact with the owner. But I'm curious how you guys manage these communications from the source of the information and the owner itself. Maybe you can explain a little bit more if your workflow or.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the basic idea is that endangered species often are bound to specific habitats, and we really need to share best practice to upgrade success rates. So that's one point of view. The opposite point of view is that opportunistic nomadic species often can put the pressure on habitat-bound species. So we need to align management plans for a larger region. So local management is important, and it needs to be in connection with large regional management, which means in my case, the first thing to do is usually start mapping. Collect information from different sources. One, what's on the platforms, but also what can I learn from landowners on local places, from neighboring organizations, NGOs, and so on. The second thing is, usually if the goals are very different, if you have to combine NGOs in nature with agricultures and with hunters, then I usually wanted to share their information. So the next thing we do is start up a WhatsApp group in which we want to see some evidence. Certainly for wild boar, for instance, it's very important that we can map how many they are, where they are, at what point in time they are there, what type they are, and so on, because we know these are very migratory species. And that often helps to detect where the key problem is and how best to manage it. But this is simply impossible if we cannot map things, and this map needs to be distributed among all involved parties as well. So mapping is the first thing, and then sharing this information to all participatory or all parties is the second thing. And therefore, you need a lot of data. The more data, the better.
Laura, maybe about Alerta Forestal?
Yeah, I agree with Job. Maybe for me, it's a little bit different because we are a research center. So for us, any data are knowledge, are producing knowledge. So as a public center, we have a clear relationship with administrators and management, and we do the same things as Joep. Alerta Forestal brings a lot of data, not a lot, but we're trying to promote and engage people and some NGOs too. But after that, as a citizen scientist, transversal line, a transversal research line in our center. For example, the coordinator of Alerta Forestal is working too in other projects around forestry management with agents forestals and other kind of management and administration. So this information could be used in those ways. I think. I don't know if I have answered you.
Yeah. I'm curious about the English case, Beth. So your volunteers, it's called your volunteers, help you and your organization to collect data. You get directly as an NGO get in contact with owners to maybe propose management schemes, and then you think about compensations if there are some trade-offs on those managements, or how does it work?
So the reason most of our landowners do restoration work or change their management is that they'll then get payments from the government for having that land. They get their countryside stewardship payments or anything like that. But to have those payments, their land has to be of a certain, it has to have had restoration, for instance, if it's degraded. So that's how we start the conversation with them, because they want the surveys to be done, they want the restoration to happen. But often, of course, land managers would like their land to be in good condition and to know that it's providing a service for the communities in those areas, that they can hunt on it, they can graze on it, that it's not causing flooding or releasing carbon. And so, yeah, certainly for us, the data comes back to that mapping. We map all of our sites and survey all of our sites in great detail. Mostly because we're then looking to write a restoration plan that says this particular drain in this particular location is blocking with this particular block. And so we're trying to restore the habitat, so to change the habitat from a degraded state to an improved one, in which case we need to know what species are there, so our volunteers can do the same type of botany surveys that we do, and we can see whether that's changing that habitat over time. And so without that data, we can't say whether or not that habitat is improving, unless we know that the plants are returning that we're missing from that landscape, or the assemblage of plants that is there has changed because we've re-wet it or improved it or got rid of the bare peat, for instance.
Yeah.
Don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that. Maybe, Carlos, you can explain your case, which will be probably the more bizarre and complicated and tricky, because when it comes to hunting, everything gets a little bit more difficult nowadays.
Yes, you're right. It comes difficult, but it shouldn't be that way. In our case, we have a very close relationship with the people who take part. We spend a significant proportion of our time on the phone because they have a lot of questions. They also like to share their problems or their challenges. So that takes a lot of time. I think we should hire a person only dedicated to speak to them. And when it comes to the management of the information, as said before in the presentation, it's confidential at the hunting state level. But then after now almost 3 years, we're going to start to share information about densities per territory. Possibly this year, a little bit about trends. Again, sometimes it gets tricky with hunting because it can have, of course, implications in hunting. Okay, but what we are trying to change is if they take their information as they have been doing in silence for many decades, they can understand if they have to, for example, close the hunting of a species for a certain period of time, or the opposite, if they have to increase hunting, because that is happening in Spain with the wild boar, with the red deer. Well, Catalonia is one of the extreme cases, unfortunately. Wild boars everywhere. So then we should increase the hunting, the control of these species. So those difficulties come from decisions taken, what they feel from an outsider. So the policymaker from the regional national government, from Brussels, they always, Brussels. So we're trying to change that in the way that, okay, you take the data, you accept your data. The data, it doesn't matter if you haven't counted this year so many partridges, or if you have a load of rabbits. So the importance is that they feel that those data are taken into account and they accept the results. It's very complex, but at the end of the day, at least from our experience, is this happening, for example, for the turtle dove in Spain and in Portugal. Many hunting grounds were not hunting turtle dove before the moratorium because they didn't have enough and they didn't want to damage the population. Now they are recording, they're doing quite a lot of counts, which is good. So I think it's keep a balance of, they want to be part of the decision-making process. But of course, they don't want to be excluded and they don't want to be damaged, which I think it is fair from their side. But of course, we're working very, very closely with them. And also very important, our system is not designed, this is key, it is not designed for calculating quotas, hunting quotas. Our system is designed for understanding the trend of the populations, the abundance, but we don't want to be involved directly in quotas, because then we can have problems, okay? Yep. It's the policymakers, it's the administrations who have to help. We are also now creating a system of professional technicians to check, to compare the results, but we don't want to use the counts for, oh, you could hunt in your land 3 wild boars, 1 roe deer, and 20 partridges. We don't want to do that. Okay, so decision has to be taken at a larger scale, and for us a very important conclusion, and now we're starting to work on that, is governance. Nothing will be useful, will be practical if we don't have a correct governance system, and that's where the European Union, the national governments, regional governments, they can make a difference. But we don't want, because otherwise we will be making mistakes already committed in the past, and it's valuable data. And now, for example, they are starting to, they want to count in the application Iberian lynx, raptors, invasive species. So the system is flowing, the system is going. So very, very exciting, but very challenging, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a nice representation of different ways biodiversity collecting data through citizen science can alter and modify and help management, whereas to take subsidies, general or more specific, like the new ones coming probably in the next years, called result-based payment schemes, more specific to some results, whereas to prevent or help with problems, like with health problems in forests or invasive species, or very abundant wild fauna related to an equilibria in our ecosystems. So I think it was a nice view on the whole topic. The next question I would like to address is about the ownership of the data, and I think this is like very relevant depending on who's collecting the data, on who is exploiting that data afterwards. I know in some places, in some platforms, private companies have to pay for citizen science data, whereas, for example, NGOs don't have to pay. Maybe we can make a quick round of 1 minute or 2 minutes each on how this works in your countries, or how your organization addresses that, if they have to pay, if they own the data, if how it works like in general. And maybe we could make the reverse order, and Carlos, you can start in 1 minute to explain this.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We are aiming to part of the information to be public, to be available. We still don't have enough data because, again, we have only been running for 3 years and not all the wildlife campaigns have been fulfilled. So we need more data, but we would like certainly to provide public data. Of course, we should give a thought about specific data for specific territories. We are an NGO, so we might need some economic support, because otherwise it's difficult to get the system going. But to be honest, we haven't thought yet about if we will charge for certain information, but definitely this year we will start to give some details which will be public, and people could be able to use them if they want.
Nice. Beth, how does it work in Yorkshire?
So we're quite new to where we're putting our citizen science data, and when we started the project, we decided to use the Peat Data Hub that had been built in part to host the data from the citizen science project, as designed by the IUCN Peatland program. So it has it's quite convenient because it has all the sections in it, especially for each of the different types of monitoring, with the idea that people could put that in from all over the UK. And that would be accessible to anyone. So there'd be no payments for downloading that data or using that data in that data hub. And so far, the landowners that we've been working with are happy for that. I can foresee a situation in which some of the landowners perhaps would not like that, only because the plots would be geolocated on their sites, and someone could go to exactly where that plot is if they wanted to, based on that data in the data hub. I mean, these are quite remote locations and places that not so many people access anyway. So I don't think it's as much of a risk as it might be with some other citizen science projects that people would stray on to private land that people didn't want them to be accessing. So far it's worked okay. We'll see whether it continues to do so.
Yep, a very direct question. Do you pay for public available data? How does it work in Waarneming? We've lost him.
Well, to continue on that story, we're quite the opposite in that way that Flanders, the north of Belgium, is a quite heavy populated area. So we don't have remote areas, and actually what she says is very risky in our business, that availability of data attracts people who you don't want to be on spot. So that's one thing. In my business, the most important question is who observed and who entered the data. I guess if you want to use these data on a larger scale, then there are some advantages. But if you want to use them on a smaller scale or need specific counts, numbers, or registrations, every volunteer has their own personal goal. And just to give you some examples, hunters sometimes tend to count on estimations, arguing that they know their land, finally. While on contrary, we know that if we do controls, we often count more animals than they do count themselves, and then they're astonished, oh, I do need to count. We know from migratory bird watchers that they say, please do not register the wood pigeons, because that would play into the case of the hunters, and we don't want that. And I know from experience that I didn't know this in advance, but I was astonished by wildlife photographers. They will never register, or only very late if they noted something special, being anxious that they will lose their quiet spot to a lot of competitors. So in a general meaning, it doesn't make sense. It's not even important. But if you're doing local projects with different people, it's very important to control reliability and validity of what has been registered. And then often I need to check what's on the platform with what I observe myself and what landowners and neighbors tell me. So you need to verify what's on.
And Laura, I understand in the case of CREAF, the information generated by the users is just public, as it is a public research institute.
Yes.
How is
sorry. Ask.
A very for example, with private companies that could exploit your information, I don't know, to prevent, in case of mosquito alert, for example, to prevent areas with mosquito risks or health risks. How do you work with companies?
Okay. First of all, I would like to go to the basis of citizen science, because I'm here for that. So citizen science is in the frame of the open data. So for me, it's really important to keep it in mind that data must, on my opinion, on CREAF opinion, must to be public. I agree with Job and other participants before us that we have sensitive data that we have to take care of. Not only the participant, the citizens' data, or also some species data. So in the particularly of mosquito alert, this is a thing that we keep in mind too, or maybe in not in alerta forestal, but also in butterfly monitoring schemes and projects, that when a sensitive species appears, it is not published at the moment. It goes to the specialist, and we take care of not to be or not to create alarm in society. Of course, in mosquito alert with some species and concrete species, but also with some butterfly species, because we don't know what can succeed if we publish this information. So obviously it is citizen science. Obviously we have to be open and democratic with our data, but we are researchers. We know about the data that arrives to us, so we have to take care of this data. So this is it's a trade-off, but it's important to protect and conserve nature, to keep it in mind.
Yeah, I agree. All right, our very last round of questions are related, I think, to a very important thing. It's about how we can ensure long-term monitoring, and especially in private protected areas. I think in natural protected areas with active management from administrations, everything gets a little bit easier theoretically, because we have administrations that are in charge of monitoring what's going on in those areas. But what tools do we have to ensure these long-term schemes? And very, very much related to that, how we engage and how we provide feedback for volunteers, so these schemes are kept long in time, because actually it's when they really get interesting for most of the monitoring schemes produced by citizen science that are able to produce very good data, and specifically I would say very scientific relevant data when they've been long run. So this is a very this is a long story, but I would ask individuals if you have like your top tips for organizations and administrations and research institutes on this. How we can do that? Open.
Okay, so I can start. First of all, I think that I'm going to try to say it in three items. First of all, in citizen science, community is really important. So we have to make sure that participants or landowners feel part of this big project, which is any project of citizen science, because have their own or their main objectives. In second hand, I would like to say that synergic strategies are the most important things between administrators and management and research centers and NGOs and I don't know, maybe hiking lovers. So the synergic way is the way for me and for CREAF, because if we are not together in this, we are not doing citizen science. So citizen science implies all of us and is for all of us. So, and it's not for all of us, I'm sorry, but I would like to consider nature as a subject, not as an object. So we don't know, we don't need data. Nature needs data. For me, it's that the thing. And maybe if you say something else, I could point some other things.
Any other point, the rest of the panelists?
I would like to add that from my opinion, the first thing is communication. I mean, most of problems in professional and personal life are because of lack of communication. So I will stress the need to sit down, have a cup of coffee, explain, listen, because it works, but you need to be ready to spend that time. Every time we go to a hunting ground, we must assume that we have to spend the time required with the landowner, with the hunter, with the gamekeeper, and the field work comes second. That's how it is. It's difficult, but that's how it is. But I will highlight that communication is really needed. And going back to my point, when it comes to problem solving and decisions, if the owners, if the landowners of that piece of land, they understand that that tool, that citizen science project or whatever, is there for helping, that might change a little bit the situation. But again, if they feel that some decisions or some problems are going to be solved, that could potentially damage them in some way, yeah, it's complicated, but I will stress communication, a lot of communication, and just try to get them part of that decision process. It's difficult, but it's possible. And also, and this is my last thought, for the policymakers, and I go back to the examples of Iberian lynxes and big raptors in Spain. In some regions, they have learned, the policymakers, that it should be a soft approach to the private land, a soft approach. Okay, you have an Iberian lynx, don't worry. We will call you one day, we will have a cup of tea, don't worry. It's not, oh, what is it? What is it? What can be done? No, relax. Then we speak and then we manage, but relax. But unfortunately, this because of the conservation situation of this species, people were very frightened, so I think it's a soft approach and time for have a cup of tea or something and then start talking.
Any other quick point from Job or Beth?
Yes, well, a lot has been said already on cooperation communication, I think. one aspect of communication for me that's important is the ring, if you want, needs to be closed. Meaning we have a lot of gatherers. We have eyes on the field. We have heads behind the desks, and then we have hands in the fields again. And there's a lot of information from specific situations being put in general databases, but they need to be translated back to specific situations to make the best use of them. And while from conservation, general information or big numbers are very important, for the specific landowner, it's more the specific information that is very important. So the ring needs to be closed, the information ring needs to be closed. And I think there's still some gaps to overcome there. That's one thing. The second thing I wanted to say is that when walking into nature, a lot of time I have the feeling that we are walking in dead forests. They are green, there are trees, but that's it. And I think that private landowners can play a very important role there. And as mentioned in one of the earlier questions, it's best that some very well kept secrets are never discovered. I think in general, the public interest or public interest is not the same as public access. Public interest is biodiversity. And I think we do need to educate the society for that part, and there's still a lot of work to be done. In my opinion, today in Belgium, when there are grants, and there's always too few grants, they're often handed out to one party. And I hope our minister is listening, because I have one tip. We need grants, and Carlos, you will like this tip. We need grants that are given to a multidisciplinary team. They need to be higher on the rankings, because the more multidisciplinary the team is, the more the chances of success and the bigger the area of success will be. And for the landowners part, it might be good that next to the ecologic needs, what Carlos already said, that they have their own private ambitions. So when you can have an integration of ecologic needs with the private owner's ambitions, then we gain more, even though if that means that besides the main objective, ecology, we need to look at not only collateral damage from other activities, but also to side products. And to tell you a very short but a very contradicting story. When visiting England a number of years ago, not that long, but for control of non-European species, I was passing on one of these pheasant pen regions where I actually saw a lot of predators, raptors, as well as fur animals that I haven't seen in Flanders for a long time. Mm-hmm. So we can, a lot has been said about hunting and hunting tourism and so on. But next to focusing on collateral damage of these situations, I think we must also focus on positive side effects of such activities. And often I think they are under-rewarded. So we need to see the complete picture for every party involved in it. Now I've said enough. Thank you.
Beth, any super last tip for long-term monitoring schemes in private protected areas?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what everyone says. It's a lot about communication and engagement. And in the Peak Partnership, we have a communication and engagement team that I've started working with to get their ideas on how we engage not just the volunteers, but the landowners in the bigger picture of what they're contributing to and how they're contributing, with the idea of taking them on a journey of you're helping to build this data set and we're all working together to get something out of it. But I also think for me, setting it up that something's better than nothing, that what you're doing doesn't have to be perfect. You know, if there ends up being some years when you don't have data or some years when you don't have a particular set of data, carry on going, because having something is better than having nothing. And so that, I think that's quite important. Just don't strive for perfection, strive for something, and work with the landowners with what you can get and what your volunteers can collect.
Nice. So we are finished with the topics we wanted to